The story opens in a quiet, seemingly ordinary hospital. The usual sounds of medical equipment, nurses attending to patients, and doctors moving about fill the air. Among the staff, Sarah, a dedicated and caring nurse, stands out. She's efficient, compassionate, and well-liked by her colleagues. The hospital feels like a place of routine, even though there's an undercurrent of something off-kilter. The atmosphere is calm, but subtle signs. An exchanged glance between Sarah and Dr. Mitchell, the head doctor, hint that things may not be as they seem. He looks at her for a moment longer than necessary, his expression unreadable. Later, Sarah delivers medications and helps few patients, and her actions seem routine, almost mundane. However, sense of discomfort begins to creep in as the camera shifts focus to the way the other staff interacts with Sarah. Some avoid her gaze, while others offer forced smiles. The tension is almost invisible, yet it hangs in the air, unnoticed by Sarah but sensed by the audience. Just when everything feels ordinary, Dr. Mitchell calls Sarah into his office. She's confused, expecting regular check-in, but what happens next changes everything. Sarah steps into Dr. Mitchell's office, expecting routine check-in or feedback. Instead, she's met with cold, unexpected words. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but we have to let you go." Oh, the shock hits her hard, her mind struggling to grasp what's happening. Dr. Mitchell's explanation is vague, almost rehearsed, citing performance issues and institutional changes as reasons, but Sarah knows her work has always been above reproach. Confusion swirls as she tries to get clear answer, but Dr. Mitchell remains distant, his face expressionless. He hands her severance package and urges her to leave quietly. As Sarah walks out, she's met with stares from her colleagues, some offering sympathetic looks, others avoiding her entirely. Heavy silence follows her through the hallways as she collects her belongings. The hospital that once felt like home now feels foreign and cold. With each step toward the exit, Sarah's unease grows. Why did Dr. Mitchell fire her? She has no idea what went wrong, and it bothers her that the reason feels so impersonal, like she's just another name on list. The feeling intensifies when she notices that the staff's behavior seems different. It's as if they're hiding something. Sarah stands outside the hospital, still reeling from her unexpected dismissal. Her phone buzzes, but she ignores it for the moment, too overwhelmed to think straight. Instead, her attention is drawn to a group of men in dark suits leaning against a sleek black car parked across the street. At first, it's easy to dismiss them as ordinary people waiting for a ride, but their behavior strikes her as odd. They don't seem to be talking to anyone, just watching her with an unsettling intensity. The men's eyes track her every move, and despite the normal bustle of the street, Sarah feels an icy chill crawling down her spine. She tries to shake it off, attributing the feeling to the stress of her firing, but the sensation lingers. One of the men adjusts his sunglasses, and for a brief moment, his gaze locks with hers. The connection is brief, but it's enough to send a wave of panic through Sarah. The feeling of being watched intensifies as she quickly glances away, feeling as though they know something she doesn't. Her heart races as she hurries to leave the area, but the men remain where they are, never taking their eyes off her. The ominous energy around them makes Sarah feel more vulnerable than she's ever felt before. Who are they, and what do they want from her? Still shaken by the strange encounter outside the hospital, Sarah answers the phone. The number is blocked, and the voice on the other end is distorted, too faint for her to make out clearly at first. She hesitates, but listens closely, her nerves on edge. The voice, cold, deliberate, begins asking unsettling questions about her life, her job, and her recent dismissal. "Why did you leave the hospital, Sarah? Did you really think you could escape?" Confusion floods her mind. Who is this person? How do they know so much about her? The voice speaks with unsettling familiarity, mentioning specific details about her career and even things she thought were private. It's clear that someone has been watching her for some time. As Sarah tries to respond, the voice grows more cryptic, suggesting that her firing was no accident and that the events she's experiencing are part of something much larger and more sinister. You're being watched, Sarah. There are things happening in that hospital that you don't understand. The truth is closer than you think. Before she can ask more questions, the voice abruptly hangs up. Sarah is left standing in her apartment, staring at the phone in disbelief. Chill sweeps over her as she realizes that whoever was on the other end knows far too much about her, and that she is now caught in something much darker than she could ever have imagined. Taken by the strange phone call, Sarah returns to her apartment, hoping to process the events of the day. The familiar warmth of her home feels strangely hollow now. The cozy, cluttered space she once found comfort in seems distant, almost oppressive. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind tapping against the windows, feels amplified, as if the apartment itself is watching her. Sarah tries to distract herself by making tea, but her hands shake too much to hold the kettle steady. The quiet in the apartment is stifling, and she can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. As she moves through the rooms, the sense of unease intensifies. Shadows seem to stretch unnaturally across the walls, and the air feels heavier, colder. There's an overwhelming sensation that she's not alone, though she's certain no one else is there. She checks the locks on the doors, paranoid that someone might have entered without her noticing. When she glances out the window, she freezes. Standing across the street, in the shadows of dimly lit alley are the same men in suits. They aren't moving, just watching her apartment with unwavering attention. Heart pounding, Sarah backs away from the window, her breath quickening. She tries to rationalize it. Maybe they're just part of the city's regular crowd. But deep down, she knows it's more than that. These men are connected to something far darker than she can comprehend. Unable to shake the growing fear, Sarah decides she can't wait any longer for answers. Her curiosity and anxiety push her to take risky step. Returning to the hospital late that night, when the building is quiet and empty, she sneaks inside. The cold, sterile halls that once felt familiar now seem foreboding and alien, each creaking step echoing louder than usual in the silence. Her first stop is Dr. Mitchell's office. The door is locked, but Sarah knows she has to get inside. She finds hidden key under flower pot by the door and slips in. The room is as it always was, clinical and neat. But there's something different now. It feels like tomb, as if something important has been buried here. She begins sifting through his files, searching for anything that might explain her sudden firing. Then she finds it. Folder labeled with her name, containing extensive notes on her performance. But it's not just about her work. It's about her life, her medical history, and some documents that suggest her involvement in secretive, unethical experiments. The notes detail her reactions to certain treatments as though her body had been under observation for years. The shock is overwhelming. It's not just her firing. It's something much darker. Dr. Mitchell wasn't just her boss. He had been part of a scheme to manipulate her and perhaps others for his own purposes. The truth Sarah has uncovered is enough to make her realize the extent of the danger she's in. The more she digs into Dr. Mitchell's involvement with the covert organization, the more it becomes clear that she's not just victim of his firing. She's a key player in something far more dangerous. With the files she's found, Sarah knows she has to act quickly before the organization realizes she knows too much. She tries to leave Dr. Mitchell's office, but as she reaches for the door, sudden noise sends chill through her spine. Footsteps echo in the hallway. Someone's coming. A panic rises in her chest as she hides behind desk, holding her breath. She peers around the corner, seeing the same men in suits she's been trying to avoid. They're not just watching her. They're actively searching for her. Sarah's heart races as she sneaks out of the office, barely avoiding detection. Her escape through the hospital feels like nightmare. Every shadow seems to conceal threat. The building, once familiar, now feels like a maze of danger. She takes the back stairwell, hoping to avoid the men, but just as she reaches the exit, they spot her. The chase begins. She runs through the darkened streets, the sound of their footsteps growing louder behind her. With every corner she turns, she knows she's getting closer to the truth, and to the men who want to silence her before she can expose it. Sarah's heart pounds as she catches her breath, trying to escape the clutches of the men in suits who have been following her. She's cornered in an alley, and just as she thinks she's about to be caught, an unexpected figure steps out of the shadows. It's one of Dr. Mitchell's former colleagues. He's part of the organization, but he claims he's on her side. With glance over his shoulder, he tells her they don't have much time. He explains the horrifying truth. Sarah wasn't just a nurse at the hospital. She was unknowingly part of a secret program that used staff and patients for illegal experiments. Her firing wasn't random. It was orchestrated as part of the organization's plan to remove her from the equation. But Sarah didn't just fall victim to their scheme. She was a key part of it. The experiments had been monitoring her reactions to certain treatments, trying to see how far they could push her. Without her realizing it, she was being groomed for a role she never even knew existed. The realization hits her like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just an innocent bystander. She was pawn in a much larger game. The men who have been following her are there to make sure she doesn't expose the program, and the truth is more dangerous than she ever imagined. Sarah stands at the crossroads of her life, the weight of the truth pressing down on her like never before. Her past has been a lie manipulated by an organization that has controlled every aspect of her existence. With the knowledge she now holds, she is more dangerous than ever to those who have tried to keep her in the dark. But the consequences of exposing the truth are dire, not just for her, but for everyone she loves. The man who revealed the truth to her urges her to go public, to share the files and blow the whistle on the organization. But Sarah knows the risks. She has seen the lengths they will go to in order to protect their secrets. If she exposes them, she'll be hunted relentlessly, and the organization will stop at nothing to silence her. There are powerful people at the top who will do anything to keep the world from knowing what they've done. With no other choice, Sarah decides to confront Dr. Mitchell directly. She must face the person who orchestrated her fate and demand answers, even if it means risking everything. Armed with the truth, she goes to his home, prepared for the final showdown. The tension between them is palpable as she challenges him, revealing everything she knows about the experiments and the organization's plans. In the end, Sarah faces a heartbreaking decision. Does she expose the dark conspiracy to the world, risking her life and everything she's ever known, or does she let the organization go on bearing the truth to protect herself?